Welcome to Speaking from Experience. I'm your host, Vishaka Kumar from the Intercultural Skills Lab at the Rotman School of Management, University of Toronto. On this show, we invite graduates of our Business Edge program to share their experiences moving to Canada and building their careers as newcomers. Often, we hear from our program participants that they find themselves unemployed or underemployed because they lack enough, quote, Canadian experience. And so today's story is about one graduate's creative path to clearing that hurdle. This is called Pascua.
Based on my experience, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that's by Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott, and now Cole Pascua.
Cole is now a Microsoft Workplace specialist at Softchoice. He joined me to talk about how his confidence and expectations for his career in Canada shifted after several months of job searching. A job search that included multiple resume changes, frustrating rejections, and hundreds of job interviews. Hi, Cole. Welcome to the Speaking from Experience podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you so much, Vishaka. And it's an honor to be here in this podcast. My name is Cole Pascua. I'm a modern workplace specialist at Softchoice, and I'm also a co-chair for sustainability at Softchoice. And yeah, I migrated to Canada in 2019, and I'm excited to share my experience on that journey.
All right. So go ahead and tell us why and when you came over to Canada.
Well, I came to Canada in 2019. It was with my mom because my stepdad is here in Canada and we wanted to all be together in Canada. And so we moved to Alberta actually first and then Saskatchewan in 2019.
Tell me what you were doing before you arrived in Canada and like some of the background behind that decision.
Well, I got my computer science degree in San Sebastian College, Recoletas, in the Philippines. And then after that, I applied as a developer in a company named Clink IT Solutions. And of course, in that company, I was a developer, I was a programmer. But then my manager was like, Cole, you talk so much, you talk a ton. Why don't you try being in sales? And of course, after 3 months, I moved to technical sales. And then after 6 months, I moved to technology strategy, which is a huge jump for me from being a programmer to technical sales. And now I'm in technology strategy, where I'm actually the virtual CTO or the chief technology officer of our customers, because most of our customers are in SMB. They don't have the capacity nor the capability to have their own CTOs or to manage their own information and their own technologies in their company. What happened was I became that CTO because I know about programming, I know about app development, project management, and then I also love talking and love selling stuff to people. So it's a good match of all. But then, of course, my mom found a wonderful guy here in Canada, and they got married in the Philippines. They met in Japan, they got married in the Philippines, and like he's been a wonderful dad to me. After that, my mom decided, okay, well, I want to be in Canada now. I want us to both move to Canada. Of course, we made that move. It was a 1 or 2 year process actually to move to Canada. And then we finally did it in February of 2019. Before that, I was in technology strategy. I also had a part-time job as a wealth manager because I love working, even if I'm out of after work hours. I'm like, okay, what do I do today? I want to manage finances of other people. Let's do it. So I also became a wealth manager for a lot of people at that time. It was bittersweet. In February, my last day of working in both those companies were actually February 15th. Like that's Friday. My flight to Canada was February 16th.
Wow.
So I love working with those two companies, and of course my customers and my clients. I really appreciate them, and I was still meeting them at that Friday, After that, I'm like, okay, I guess you're my last customer, Jason. Thanks. And so
You did not want to let go of those
oh,
opportunities. It sounds like you didn't give yourself a
oh,
break before moving.
oh yeah, I did not. Even after I graduated around March, end of March, and then the next week after that, I was actually working for for Accenture already. Didn't have that break. I didn't have a vacation ever since I was in university. After that, I was working already. When I was switching from Accenture to Clink IT, I did not have any breaks. My last day at Accenture was, I believe, Wednesday. And then my first day in Clink, it was the Thursday. So I didn't have any break. I love working, if that
Yeah.
wasn't obvious yet.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and this will
Mm.
lead into my next question, which is,
Oh yeah.
well, clearly you love working and you like to keep busy.
Mhm,
So once you left those amazing jobs
mhm,
back home in the Philippines, and then you made your way to Canada, can you
mhm.
tell me what the expectations were and if they were met?
Well, thinking about it, when I moved to Canada, I was pretty confident on my skills because I know, I mean, hey, I worked with Clinkit, I worked with Accenture, I worked with Microsoft even when I was in university, I was already a Microsoft student partner. And so I've had all of those names with me and all of those skills and all of those wonderful things. And even the customers that vouch for me in the Philippines, they were willing to tell my references here in Canada that, hey, this is my tech strategist. This guy was my wealth manager. This guy made me some nice bucks, whether it was in wealth management or in technology strategy. Because in tech strategy, I tried to save companies hundreds and thousands of dollars, while still giving them, proper ROI for their cloud investments in Microsoft and in other cloud technologies. So when I went to Canada, I was pretty confident. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll take a week of vacation, just unpack my stuff, and then apply to jobs. 1 month in, I was not getting anything. I wasn't getting any interviews. I thought of it as, okay, this is my 1 month vacation. Great. That's exploring around Canada, Alberta, the wonderful mountains and experiences in Alberta. And then 3 months in, I was like, ugh, what is this? What's happening to me? Like, is my resume? Is there something wrong with my resume? I started to redo my resume at that time. And again, I have two jobs. So I looked at the requirements of becoming a wealth manager here in Canada, and it's harder than in the Philippines. It's hard to be a wealth manager in the Philippines, but it's also much more harder in Canada. And so that wasn't an option that I thought of. After looking at all of those requirements, I concentrated on just technology strategy. Okay, how can I become a technology strategy here in Canada? Or maybe I can start with technical sales because that's a little bit lower than technology strategy. I kept doing that for 6 months, 7, 8, and then the 9 month was in, and I was like, what's going on? Aren't my skills needed here? Is it super saturated, or are they not believing that I have these skills and references and all of these wonderful things that I did in the Philippines? During that 9 months, it was a roller coaster journey because sometimes I'll get interviews. And then, of course, they'll ask me, do you have any Canadian experience? Of course, I would say no. I'm like, hello, that's why I'm applying for you, because I want Canadian experience. After that, they won't call. Of course, I didn't say that, hey, I'm applying. That's why I'm here. But when they hear that, okay, you don't have any Canadian experience. Okay, well, we'll call you if we have any updates. And they never call. They ghost me or something. And some wonderful HRs would tell me the reason was I did not have any Canadian experience, which is great, right? But then I get stuck in that catch-22 where I'm trying to apply for a Canadian job, but then those jobs need Canadian experience. Now, how can I get Canadian experience if those jobs are not available for me? I got into that huge dilemma of trying to figure out, how do I penetrate this Canadian landscape, the Canadian job market? But also I was doubting myself for it because I've got all of these experiences and I don't even get to the second stage of the interview.
When you were being told that you're not being hired because you don't have Canadian experience, Did they ever expand on that further and say why they felt Canadian experience would be more suited or valuable for that position you were interviewing for?
The answer to that, Vishaka, to be honest, is no. They never
Wow.
expounded on that. I've probably done 200, 300 interviews during that timeline. Not one has told me why they wanted Canadian experience. It might also be my fault because I don't think I've asked, why do you need this? I was lucky to have HR people that told me that the Canadian experience was required for this role, but not in a sense that why that Canadian experience mattered at that time.
Wow. Okay. So you've hit the 9-month mark. So tell me what happened after.
I hit the 9-month mark. I was like, I need to do something else. Something's not working here. I need to reinvent how I'm doing things. I've rewritten my resume. I've rewritten my LinkedIn profile. I've probably added 200 people during that timeline just to familiarize myself with what do they need or what are they posting about and everything. I've even done those LinkedIn learning courses on here's how to build your resume, here's how to build things. And it wasn't working. What I did now was I leveraged my network because that's one thing that I don't have in Canada. But I know that someone in the Philippines might have someone or might know someone in Canada. And so I actually reached back to my CEO in Klinkit, Shanti, and I told her, hey, do you have anyone in Canada that might have a job for me? Shanti was like, oh, let's talk to Monette. And Monette was actually Shanti's cousin, and Monette lives in BC here in Canada. And so that's the next step for me was I contacted Monette. I asked Monette, hey, do you have any jobs for me in tech strategy or anything Microsoft 365? And Monette was so kind to say, well, not really, but I do have project management roles for ServiceNow. And for me, it was like, okay, do I really want this job? Because this is not Microsoft 365. This is ServiceNow. I know nothing. I have zero knowledge in ServiceNow. But then Monette was willing to take the risk for me in a sense that, okay, you know project management. You've written SOWs before. You were an amazing salesperson based on what Shanti told me in your resume. So I'm willing to take this risk for you, even if you have zero knowledge in ServiceNow. For our audiences, ServiceNow is a cloud computing platform that enables companies to manage their ticketing systems, to manage automations of their IT workflows. So that really helps all of their companies on that. But then, of course, before that instance, I didn't know what is ServiceNow. I didn't even know what that thing is, right? Because all of my knowledge is in Microsoft 365, in Windows, in Azure. I have zero knowledge on what an ITSM even was at that time, or what an IT service management was at that time. But I was willing to learn, and I was willing to use my skills in sales, in marketing, in project management, which are all transferable skills for me. And then I was willing to also take the risk with Monette because I know that Monette believed in me at the time. Monette believed that these are all wonderful skills, Cole, but my company is not a Microsoft partner. It is a ServiceNow partner. And if you want to be in my company, you want to learn all of these things, right? You have all the skills, transferable skills. You just need to learn the specifics in ServiceNow. And so I took the risk. I became the project manager of ServiceNow projects. After a while, it was an amazing experience because I get to interact with a lot of Canadian customers here in Canada, and of course, a lot of my teammates and coworkers are also mostly all in Canada too. And so that really gave me a good experience, a good Canadian experience, quote unquote. Because if not for Monette and if not for Pretty Solutions, I wouldn't be in an amazing role at Softchoice right now.
I mean, it was not just her taking the risk. You were also taking the risk.
Yes.
And you were also compromising on some of the things that had defined your career until then. Can you tell me a little bit about what was going on in your mind when you had to make that decision that not only were you going to now have to deal with technology that you had not learned before, and then also you were taking on a job title that was very different to what you were looking for?
I can think of it in 3 aspects. The first aspect is learning a technology that I've never seen before or touched before. Because again, in that technology aspect, I was excited to learn a new technology like ServiceNow, but I was also disappointed because I've got all of these expertise in Microsoft. I'm not going to be able to use it, right? But then, of course, as we expand on that story, that's when I actually approached Monette and asked her, okay, I can build a business development plan for you for including Microsoft in your portfolio. And then, of course, that resulted in me becoming the Microsoft Solutions Advisor in Purdy. And we built a really great practice in Purdy before I moved to Softchoice. But then, of course, during that time when I was getting hired, it was a bittersweet moment because I have so much expertise in Microsoft and I cannot use it. But then it's also exciting because I'm going to learn a new technology, right? So it's a mix of both on the technology aspect. The second aspect was monetary. Because of course I don't want to be a burden to my mom and to my parents. I was living in their house, and I've only got so much savings from the Philippines, and so I don't want to be a burden to them, right? And so I want to earn my own money, and of course I want to buy my own stuff. I mean, I have a very high standards in terms of fashion, Vishaka. and I also with technology, like I love smart home stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so of course I'm not gonna ask my parents to buy me all of those expensive stuff. I want to earn my own money at that time. The third aspect is my mental health too. As I've told you earlier, Vishaka, in my intros, I've never had a vacation in my life. Of course, it was an eye-opener for me because I should have a good work-life balance too. That's very important. But it was also a big shock for me because I've never been this long without work, right? Like I have that 9-month gap in my resume. Even if you look at it right now, there's still that 9-month gap. And so my mental health was a little bit degrading at that time because I was questioning my self-worth. I was questioning why no company is accepting me, right? And so, that third aspect actually is, I think, the most important out of the three. Like I can learn any technology at any time. I can ask for money from my parents or from get a loan from a bank or whatnot. But the third aspect is the mental health aspect, which is the most important thing for me. Like I could lose the technology piece, I could lose the money piece, but the mental health is very important. But also I wanted to really work now. Like I'm tired of taking a rest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That really will help my mental health if I start working.
So you take on this new job to now work with technology you're not familiar with, work with clients that you're meeting for the first time, and also you're now in a new culture. Can you tell me some of the skills and the insights you developed from this first opportunity in Canada?
I think the first skill that I learned even before I accepted the job is really flexibility. Flexibility because you want to be flexible on what your job opportunities are. I think one of the things that I missed when I was looking for a job was I really tried to get the technology strategy job. But I realized that you also have to build trust within the workplace environment, within that community. Because remember that the Philippine work community is different from the Canadian work community. And the second skill is kind of connected to flexibility, which is adaptability. You want to look at yourself and ask, what skills do I have right now that are transferable to other opportunities? I'm a technology strategy that involves writing, that involves selling, that involves marketing, that involves managing IT infrastructure for customers, that involves talking to a lot of customers, that involves managing projects, managing timelines and deadlines. All of those skills can be transferable to another role, which in this case was project management. So with that flexibility and adaptability, I was able to really, let's say, reform myself to fit that job description that Monette was looking for and provide her with all of the skills that I have, even though it was not all of my skills.
So you've obviously identified the importance of being flexible and adaptive through this process. Tell me a bit about how you advanced from there.
So what I did in Purdy was I took project management. So I managed 5 different projects with 4 different customers. And so during these times, of course, I was still trying to develop my skills in ServiceNow. Then I realized that sometimes when I talk to these customers, there was a gap in their productivity suite. And that's where Microsoft 365 comes in. And I asked Monette, hey, is it okay if I built you a business development plan for creating a Microsoft practice in your company? Because again, You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You want to try to diversify and provide as much service to your customers as possible, especially if there's a gap, if you can see that there is a gap. And so while I was still doing project management for ServiceNow projects, I was building that Microsoft business management plan. And so we ventured into the Microsoft practice. We became a Microsoft partner. And of course, what happened was, the pandemic happened. And that Microsoft practice actually was really a good source of income for us and balanced our financial sheets during that time. Of course, when enterprises were pulling their investments in their IT infrastructure, but of course, they were trying to increase their productivity because at that time, everyone just suddenly jumped from being in the office to working remote. And of course, what do you need in remote? You need Microsoft Teams. And of course, a lot of companies were like, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing in Microsoft Teams. Can you provide a training? Can you provide us automation tools? What can we do on this? Like, we don't interact with customers live anymore. We need our forms to be digitized because I'm not going to send a form, 2,000 kilometers away and then try to send it back, or we don't have fax anymore. And so all of those wonderful things are what really enhanced our partnership with Microsoft. And of course, for me, enhanced my role in Purdy. So I expanded not just managing ServiceNow projects, but I also was the lead project manager for our Microsoft 365. And then I transitioned to being the Microsoft Solutions Advisor to customers, where it was closer to the technology strategy role that I was trying to gear up when I first arrived to Canada.
Yeah, so I think in that short period, and I am going to acknowledge how short a period that is for you to have introduced a new business vertical, led teams, and then also create a role for yourself in a sense. That's actually taken you no time to do at all. So you've spent 9 months trying to look for this job, you get an opportunity, and then you create that opportunity for yourself. So that's such a interesting and wonderful and inspiring journey that you just traced out.
The next thing that I want, and I hope that newcomers will also learn while listening to this wonderful podcast, is I want them to make sure that when they get into a role, it's a role that they will like, of course, as number one. And it's a role that can provide them with a long-term strategy. And it depends on what your long-term strategy is. It's not always about influencing and trying to add another offering to your portfolio. It can also be that, okay, I wanted to have experience on this company, so maybe I can move to a different company, for example, or maybe I can move to a different role in this company. Right now, when I'm trying to recruit people at Softchoice, which is, again, another wonderful company, if only I can recruit everyone to Softchoice, I will. When I recruit people to Softchoice, I always tell them that you don't need to fulfill 100% of this JD. You just need 50%. And the other 50%, as long as you're willing to learn on those, you can achieve that role. You can get to that role. Right? And if not, then you can use this role to move up in Softchoice, right? Like right now, I am a Microsoft Modern Workplace at Softchoice. But now that, a lot of people at Softchoice see how hard I work, because whether you think that I'm a smart or not, Vishaka, I want you to know that I'm a hard worker. I want everyone to know that I'm a really hard worker. And I try my best to do everything that's needed in my job and more. Like, I try to do the best that I can in my job and even add more to that. But again, that long-term strategy is very important, because you might not be in the role that you want right now, but is that role going to bring you into the role that you want in 1 to 2 years, or even in a 3-year horizon? And again, this can also be a cultural difference, right? Because in other cultures, especially if you're coming from an Asian culture, you might think, and this is also part of my mental well-being at that time, like, if you're already in a high position, at least in an Asian culture, and you go down, people might look down on you like, what happened? What's wrong with you? What did you do? What, right? Like, were you in a scandal or something? Or did you get into trouble? Did your manager fire you? What happened? So there can be that cultural expectation where you always have to move up. Yeah. But remember that sometimes you have to go down to move higher. Think of it as an arrow. Like you cannot really push an arrow like that. It's not going to go that far. But if you push an arrow and try to stretch it as far as you can and then release it, then that downward momentum will actually give you a higher upward momentum. And so sometimes when you think about your long-term strategies of finding a career in Canada, there may be jobs that might be lower than what you expect, but it can put you in a higher position in the future. Like always look for that future. And the thing is, you're not going to be stuck in that job for 1, 2, 3, 10 years. You can always move around in that organization or move to a different role.
Thank you so much, Ko. Such a pleasure talking to you. I'm so happy you could make it today. And thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is an honor to be here in the podcast, Vishaka, and saying thank you so much for inviting me. And I hope that a lot of our newcomers and IEPs that recently moved to Canada can learn about my experience. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or add me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Speaking from Experience. I'm Vishaka Kumar from the Rotman School of Management's Intercultural Skills Lab. For more information about our programs, please click the link in the show notes or follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we post all our updates. Thank you to Pascua for his incredible storytelling and energy in sharing his experience and expertise with us. This podcast is recorded and produced by me, Vishaka Kumar. Avery Moore Kloss is our podcast editor. Speaking from Experience is supported by the Rotman Intercultural Skills Lab at the University of Toronto, which promotes a deeper understanding of intercultural competencies for professionals. Thank you for listening.